Okay, we are live. Welcome back to the Hill of Roses, where we come once again to celebrate the best contributors to our independent policy movement for progress to bring power to the people. With us today, we have another special guest with us. We have a congressional candidate from New York's 5th District, Shaniyat Chowdhury. Shaniyat, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me on, John. I really appreciate this.
Yeah, I'm really glad to be able to talk with you today because I think we really need to be expanding our movement to every part of this country. And I really wanted to, before we get into the details of your agenda and what you're hoping to be able to change if you are elected, I'd love for my audience to be able to get to know you a little bit better, what you're currently doing or were doing before you decided to run for office, and what inspired you to actually run for the U.S. congressional district that you're in.
Yeah, for sure. So, I go by Shaniyat Chowdhury, but I go by Sean for short. I'm a product of public housing, public education, and essentially I'm running because I believe that as a working person myself, we could champion working class representation. And clearly, New York 5 has not had that for the last 22 plus years. I'm challenging a 20-year incumbent who is taking $2 million per cycle from Wall Street, essentially meeting the needs of folks on Wall Street and not the people here in New York 5. My parents came here shortly after the liberation war in Bangladesh. They came here searching for equality and equity, and instead we faced Islamophobia. We dealt with housing insecurity, where we lost our home to the foreclosure crisis 12 years ago. And that pretty much set me up to where I am now. I ended up enlisting in the United States Marine Corps out of poverty because they provided housing, healthcare, education benefits, and I needed that because I'm the eldest of three siblings. So when you are the child of immigrants, when you are the eldest sibling, you have an obligation, an unwritten obligation to do everything you can to support your family. But even during that time, I realized that even though these benefits were there just by enlisting, I believe that we shouldn't have to do that. No person should have to risk their lives for unjust wars in order to have basic necessities. So essentially, I started getting more involved, and it just started happening at the right time. Trump was coming up, and then I started getting more involved in activism around climate change and housing rights. And I ended up working in the New York State Assembly for a couple of years as a legislative intern. Worked on criminal justice policies, housing, climate change, and then Trump got into office, and I decided, all right, well, I got to do more than just being an activist. I wanted to break barriers at this point. And we saw that after he did win, I decided, all right, well, what's the next step? AOC, luckily she came around the right time, got involved in her campaign. I was her staffer. And then shortly after that, the moment that I decided to run was I did a mission down to the Tijuana border, actually, with other veteran organizers. Essentially, Trump has sent down the military to the border. Mm-hmm. And as a veteran, I organized other veterans to show that veterans care more than just about veteran rights. We care about intersectional justice, immigrant rights, healthcare, all that. And, I told my now opponent what I saw and what families told me. And his answer was, we just need to create more bed space for asylum seekers in these detention centers. Yeah. And so that was underwhelming because families being torn apart, thrown in cages. And I just thought that this is what happens when Wall Street buys our politicians. They become so out of touch with what's going on in the world. And that pretty much did it for me. And now here we are 1 year later.
Yeah, no, first, I want to thank you for your service serving in the Marine Corps. I understand that you're saying you were kind of pressured into that economically, but I still want to thank you for that service. And I think you touched on a lot of elements that we find to be common factors of all the people that we're interviewing on our channel. You're running against a longtime Democratic incumbent who is no longer meeting the needs of the people and is not championing a progressive cause. And that, frankly, it comes from this idea of both the Trump election being a big awakening in a lot of minds of where the country was currently at. And frankly, even seeing AOC, seeing that some of us working class individuals have a chance to be leaders if we simply put ourselves out there and put in the work, and that we need to step up in our leadership roles. I would love for you to just detail a little bit more about your opponent. You obviously alluded to the immigration issue that you talked to him about being one of the factors. What are some of the other issues that you've had with your incumbent that he is no longer up to caliber to be serving your district?
Yeah, the biggest issue that we face in New York 5 is the housing crisis that we have. I've mentioned it earlier in my introduction that my family lost our home to a foreclosure crisis, and my opponent was one of the key Democrats that bailed out Wall Street.
Mm.
And we're seeing it right now. New York 5 has the highest rates of home foreclosures in New York State. Homes are being foreclosed, small businesses are being lost, and these are everything our families have worked for. This is not just on a national level too. We're seeing it hyper locally, but nationally, what we're seeing is that he sits as the chair on consumers protection. So he should be protecting working families. However, he's taking thousands of dollars from groups like Blackstone and KKR, all these private equity
Yeah.
firms, and big banks. So he's doing their bidding to deregulate big banks and payday lenders, so they can continuously be predatory towards working families because that's how they make their money. And then locally, he sits as the chair of the Queens Democratic Party, where it's being operated by 3 real estate attorneys. That doesn't make sense to me because these real estate attorneys being involved in our political system, what they are essentially doing is they have a practice on the side. The same firms that are giving money to Meeks are also giving money to these real estate attorneys. And these attorneys, what they do is they take working families to court, especially in communities of color like mine. New York 5 is a minority majority district. So they take all these families to court who are pretty much shackled to the financial system where they can't afford to pay off their mortgages or their business loans. So they foreclose on all these things, and they make millions of dollars off of that, displacing families, taking away jobs from our communities, and essentially that's been going on for a very, very long time. So it's a circle, coming full circle on this reckless system. So he's in this again. This is more than just a battle against Grover Meeks. This is challenging the whole system. But Meeks is an enabler, so someone does have to challenge him. And I figured if no one else was going to do it, then I would do it.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. Frankly, that's part of the inspiration I even consider at one point running is that, frankly, there's a lot of complacency and just unwillingness to take the risk to step up in a working class position because it is so hard. I wanted to ask you what that experience has been like so far running for office, and particularly in these times where we've seen such craziness from both pandemic, keeping a lot of us transitioning back to home rather than being able to be out in the field, as well as now with this kind of civil unrest from the causes of criminal justice reform and the economy that has led to so much protesting. How has that impacted your campaign so far, and what's been your approach to trying to get the message out there?
Yeah, I mean, this campaign started out a little over a year ago with $0 in the banking account, with zero infrastructure and support, but we built this from the ground up, and that's what organizers do: is that we build things from the ground up. So we're organizers first, activists first, and then politicians last. And I'm so proud of how far we've come. We've raised over $100,000. We've raised, we have hundreds of supporters and volunteers making calls every day. So when this coronavirus happened, I think 2020, we talked about this earlier before we started the show, was that this year has pretty much opened the layers of this fragile economy and system we're living in. Coronavirus has definitely shown us the income inequalities that we have, the health inequalities that we see, and what's going on with the racial injustice. I think we've definitely seen a tipping point with what's going on with George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor's, and so many more that we've lost this year. And I think that, for starters, our campaign, when it came to coronavirus, we immediately shifted our campaign without any hesitation, shifted our campaign from the ground game to digital ground game because, as organizers, we realized how severe the situation was going to be. We did not know how long we'd be in it, but we realized the severity of this. So we've been able to make phone calls, checking on our voters, make sure they're doing well. We even turned our campaign to a mutual aid effort for the months of March and April. So every donation received for those 2 months, we were able to provide groceries and central items to families who needed it in the district. And then, now with what's going on in this country, I'm a big advocate for racial justice in this country, and it's one of my biggest platforms is fighting the criminal justice system, really abolishing the prison industrial complex, abolishing the police, and I think that we need to divest from policing to really bring more resources, investing in resources in our community so we can improve the quality of life. So we don't really necessarily need policing on Black and brown communities when we just need, basic things like education, housing, healthcare. So when we are in that situation, we don't necessarily have to worry about being arrested and stopped by police for unwarranted reasons. And also just holding this country accountable for what's been going on for the last 400 years. I think that too often, even the UN, the U.S. is such a big player in the UN, no one really holds the U.S. accountable for unjust wars, for
Yeah.
what we've done with slavery. It's not enough to talk about it in our textbooks. It's not enough to celebrate Black History Month for 1 month out of the year without really acknowledging and prioritizing the needs of African Americans and Indigenous people for generations. We this country took everything, and we have yet to hold ourselves accountable to it. So that's why I'm a big supporter for reparations. I'm a big supporter in returning land and the rights to Indigenous nations. So it's a lot deeper than what we see right now.
Yeah, and I think from that, I have a grasp of the inspirations for why you were running and how you've been doing your campaign so far. And you've touched on several subjects of importance to you, but I wanted to focus now on, let's say you were able to get through your primary, you're going into Congress. What would you say are some of those top 3 to 5 solutions that you think are the top priorities we need to do? Because there's so much that needs to be accomplished, and I think you're recognizing that. But how do you think we need to prioritize to be able to get more and more of this agenda through Congress? Because they have been such obstructionists on a lot of the whims of the people. Where do you think we need to start?
Yeah, I mean, it does start with our own communities, our own backyards. We need more people to run. When we look at Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and the rest of the squad members, there are only 4 members out of 435 members of the House of Representatives. We know if anyone follows what goes on, we know they can't do it by themselves. As strong advocates as they are, we know that they faced many challenges as day one going into. They faced many challenges and opposition to what they were advocating for. So it does make it difficult without having any kind of support. And essentially, myself and so many other great candidates out there who are running, we are aspiring to be that support to help them to build that cause, to really make us bigger and stronger. So we need more people to run for office. I think that's one. 2, I think that we cannot, as progressives on the left, we cannot sacrifice our morals and our values. That happens, that happens a lot because of the stronghold that comes from the Democratic establishment elite. So I do believe that as a congressional representative, I do want to make sure that on the ground, we are supporting grassroots candidates, that we are supporting grassroots organizers to help the cause. Because electoral politics is not the end all of everything. I do believe that we need to work in tandem with organizers on the ground who are trying to bring about change on a daily basis.
Okay, so I'm hearing a lot of this organizing and trying to increase the causes of the movement. What do you think should be, once we have the support, so we can actually start accomplishing some of the legislation we want? Do you think that there's an order of policies that we need to do, or is it just a blunt force, let's put all the bills out there and see what happens? Do you think there are certain levers of power we need to unlock first to be able to accomplish this agenda? Or do you think it's just simply a numbers game where we're struggling right now?
I believe that we do need to look at what, every issue right now is a priority. But I do believe that when there are issues like Medicare for all, the Green New Deal, for example, the free public college tuition, these are essential right now to bring some systematic changes going forward. Medicare for all is really popular amongst people, amongst the states throughout the country, but really it's really up to the federal level to have the courage to really support that. With the Green New Deal, that's also another priority because we have 2 years ago when AOC brought that out with the Green New Deal, it's 12 years. Now we're down to 10 years of trying to completely change 180 our economy and our energy system to non-renewable. And then free public college tuition, right? We spent $6 trillion in the last 20 years on endless wars in the Middle East. We found out that both these wars have been built on lies. And these things cost more than what we would be needed to eliminate student debt in this country and make college free for students. I don't believe that students should be burdened with student debt. And when we take that away, we could actually help the economy more. We'll be seeing more consumers. We'll be seeing more productivity, more homeowners, and I think that will really improve the quality of life for a lot of working people in this country.
Okay, so I am curious. We obviously need to be able to get more of these people into office. You alluded that's one of your first priorities. What do you think is the step that the progressive movement needs to undertake to be able to start winning more of these elections? Frankly, it's great to have policy. We acknowledge that is what the end goal is of what we're fighting for, but we need to also, as a movement, talk about the politics. How do we start winning, in your opinion, more of these races that we've been falling short in?
Yeah, I'm gonna be quite honest. I've seen it with the Bernie Sanders campaign. I'm a avid supporter for Bernie Sanders, and I still would be writing him. I will be writing him in for this election here. But I believe that there needs to be more nuance around class and race together. I think that's progressive movement. We focus a lot on the class aspect, but not enough on race. And I think that what the Democratic establishment does well, unfortunately, is have a stronghold on a lot of Black communities and communities of color, a lot of older voters, who all they've known was the Democratic establishment. That's all they known. So they vote more. We've seen younger people turn out more, but obviously there's a lot of pushback, suppression, voter suppression. Not enough young people, not given the right and the opportunity to vote. I do believe we need to lower the age to voting to 16. And I think that as a movement, as a progressive movement, we need to really put forward folks who come from working class backgrounds and communities of color to step up. We need to really organize in these communities. And I think that's how we really start breaking that change. It's also generational change, right? We've seen a lot of older voters, again, they vote with the status quo. But I think that now it's trying to really and find those people who are coming from these experiences and really supporting them. And they're there, but we just got to do the work. It is a lot of hard work, but it's definitely worth the fight.
Yeah, and I think there's two core demographics, in my opinion, that we have lacked, at least when it came to this past election. And I'm curious what you think we need to be doing better to hopefully reach out and expand our base. In my mind, we really fell short when it came to the Black community. We saw that when Ernie and many of the other progressives kind of got swept through the South. And secondly, it's the older generation. What do you think we could be doing to better reach out to those specific communities?
Yeah, I mean, aside from, I just mentioned earlier, aside from the organizing in these communities, I do believe the messaging does need to change a little bit. Because when we do talk about our messaging, it is strictly just class, but we also need to implement the racial ramifications in there because it's real, and I think that we need to really validate people's identities and their experiences through our messaging. So it's just not enough to talk about, healthcare for all, but what does it mean for communities of color? What does it mean for Black Americans in this country? What does the criminal justice system do? I think that we need to talk more about that as well. We need to really talk more and really look at the values. And we share these values with a lot of civil rights leaders, right? Malcolm X, Martin Luther King Jr. We share these values, but now we need to really put it into a messaging where it's led. We need more Black and brown leaders, more intersectional leaders up front. So we need to bring those voices up forward. And I think that we can start seeing these changes. But until then, it's a long journey. But we do have 2 years until next midterm, but we also do have 4 years, and I think that's plenty of time to really find the next presidential candidate for the progressive left movement.
And what about the older community? You touched on the Black community there. What do you think we need to do to have more older voters see the need for progress, in your opinion?
I ponder on this all the time. Yeah. It's so hard. It is so difficult to try to change the minds of older voters because change is a scary thing. We see Republicans too. They don't want to see change whatsoever because people are afraid of change. And I think that with older voters, people are afraid to change, and not knowing the unknown, I think really does terrify them because they've been so bought out by the establishment media, by the persona, the smokescreen. I believe President Barack Obama has displayed, and Joe Biden. So, and I think that you know when the media constantly throws down our throats that these are our best options, and try to really discredit the character of leftist organizers and people like Bernie Sanders, I think it just makes it difficult. So it's really about starting having these conversations at home. I've talked to many of our voters about how young voters have, they try to talk to their families. Sometimes it's difficult, sometimes it does work, but other times it can be difficult to trying to change their minds because they're just so stuck on it. But it really does start organizing around with them as well. So it can't just be young voters getting involved, but we do need to bring our aunties and uncles into the conversation to organize with us.
Okay. And I'm curious, in your opinion, so far it's been a messaging and organizing way of causing change. But what do you think are some of the policies that those generations are looking for? Or do you think that it really is just not a policy argument for those people and it does, frankly, just come down to messaging?
Yeah. I think, Bernie Sanders, I believe he did everything he could, when he talked about Medicare for all. He did bring up vision and dental when we look to protect Social Security. I think our policies are definitely there. But I think, again, it just comes down to not only the messaging, but also I think it's up to, at this point, you know, I'd rather just burn the system down right now and start something new from the ground up. Because the system, again, we can't. It's hard to really organize around a system to work against it when we know they have the power of the establishment institution, they have the money, they have that whole backing, so it makes it difficult to organize around it and against it. We need to burn this thing down to the ground. So I think that in the next 2 to 4 years, we'll start seeing that change. I'm very confident in that.
Okay. And so, in your opinion, like, how do you know which areas? Obviously, there's a lot of incumbents that we are not currently liking. But how do you know in this movement of people that you're hoping to bring in, who to try and align with? Is it just around these common core policies of that AOC and the squad, as you mentioned before, are championing? Is there anything on your mind that would constitute a potential litmus test to define progressivism and who you want to work with? Or do you not try to have that and it's more just their overall persona? What's in your mind the people you want to try and align with?
The people I want to align with are people that come from working class experiences. The people I want to align with are people who uphold the values of Martin Luther King Jr. Martin Luther King Jr. was anti-war, he was anti-poverty, and he was about uplifting workers' rights. He those are three values he was very public about towards the last years of his life. And I think that as a movement, we've been able to uphold those values. But when I look at candidates that I want to support, I think the first thing that I want to ask is, where are you taking your money from? Are you taking
Sure.
grassroots
Yeah.
small dollar donors? Or are you taking money from the real estate industry, the finance industry? Like, those are important questions because then I will know what their values are from the get-go. And I think that once we get past that, we can talk about the policies, because policies, you know, they always need work, and I think there's always room for improvement. So, sometimes I needed some pushing. My team, had to push me in a certain direction to really see things, and I think that having an honest conversation and dialogue around issues is really, really important. But again, it starts with where they're taking their money from. That's what I look at first.
Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense to me. I think the last questions I want to ask you about is some of the specific issues that our community particularly cares about. Our key pillars here at the Hill of Roses is economic and democratic empowerment, because we believe hand in hand, those are the ways we actually return power to the people. And so in economic empowerment, one of the key issues that we firmly believe here at the channel is the idea of a universal basic income. Is that something that, in your opinion, is a good idea? And if so, how do you think something like that should be constituted? And if not, why do you believe that?
Yeah, I do. I am a strong advocate for UBI. We've seen that it's possible. In a time like this, we've seen that it is possible. Even I don't believe $1,200 is enough. We do need to institute a $2,000 income. But from the start of the coronavirus pandemic to present day, we've seen billionaires make over $435 billion during this time,
Sure.
while working people have lost everything. We lost our homes, our jobs, we lost our loved ones. So I don't think it's a lot to ask for UBI. I don't think it's a lot to ask for reparations. We see that the money is there, but it's really about prioritizing it.
Sure.
So I want to prioritize working families. The same. I don't think that it's really too much to ask for just to support working people during difficult times, because the billionaires Jeff Bezos is being supported. He's exploiting his workers to this
Yeah,
day,
when everyone's going through a crisis, he's making billions.
billions of dollars. So he's about to become a trillionaire.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's a lot. This is what the system is for. This is what the government is for. The government is supposed to be there for working people. And I just think that for so long, especially after World War II, we've seen so many of these corporations they become the buffer between working people and the government that's supposed to protect and serve the working people. So we need to take all the power out of the hands of corporations. I do believe we need to also go on a consumer strike, and not buy things from Amazon and other corporations. And we do need to support our small local businesses and promote our wellness that way.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And the second pillar that I had mentioned beforehand, and I'll try to conclude on this topic before we ask people to be able to help your campaign and how they can actually end up doing that, is democracy reform. And, frankly, a large thing that a lot of the people within like the Justice Democrat movement have been focusing on overturning Citizens United decisions, but that's going to require, a constitutional amendment, which can be a very hard process to be able to endure. What are some of the other aspects that you believe needs to be done to have a more representative government for the people?
Yeah, I do believe in having a public financing system. A lot of the times it's a big reason why a lot of grassroots progressive candidates have difficult times challenging these powerful incumbents is because of the lack of money, the lack of institutional power. In New York City, here we do have a public financing system for our city council candidates, so we do matching funds, and I do think that should be done on the congressional level.
Okay. And question, in that public financing system, do you believe that it should be accompanied with something like a democracy voucher, democracy dollars, or do you think it's just the matching system we need in place?
Yeah, we do need a democracy dollars. Actually, that is something we're actually looking more into.
Okay.
One of our policy people actually brought it up, but I do love the idea of it.
Okay. Well, Shaniyat, thank you for answering my questions today and being able to clarify the platform and the true inspirations for yourself running. For those that are watching that liked your message and want to be able to support your campaign, how can they end up helping you out? And frankly, how do you want to be able to use any money going forward? Your primary being on June 23rd, we're around 3 weeks away. What's the strategy going forward for you to try and win your primary?
Yeah, I mean, our biggest strategy right now is, with 19 days out, is doing the voter acquisition. We can't knock on doors, but we're definitely text banking. We are making phone calls, and we've been hitting our numbers. But, the more people we have, the greater our reach will be. So if and we could definitely win this thing. It's possible that this district has a 2% voter turnout in the congressional primaries. So, it's pathetic. But we could definitely win this thing. We just need all the help we can get. So please email us at info@sean2020.com. And if you even want to donate, that'd be great, because we do need to continuously pay for voter acquisition data. We do need to pay for mailers. So we're pushing that out a lot during this time. You can make a contribution at sean2020.com.
Well, Shaniyat, thank you so much for being here today and being able to answer our questions. Thank you to the Rosebuds that were able to attend today. I'm really thankful that we can actually expand this movement. There's been a lot of New York candidates, so I'm hoping that come June 23rd, we are able to get more of you through the door, because frankly, it's in my opinion that we need almost every single congressperson replaced. There's, as you said, there's like a handful. So
they all need to go.
I really appreciate you being on today and being able to elaborate more why your race is an important one. So thank you for that. Rosebuds, I just want to let you know a couple of programming notes as we are wrapping up here. We're going to be having our first article interview tomorrow. So one of our contributors, Eric L. Martin, will be coming on tomorrow to be able to talk about the ongoing protests and what we need to be doing in terms of criminal justice reform. And then next week, we're going to be having another slew of candidates being able to come on to the program. And finally, and most importantly, we're going to be having a day-long event on June 14th. We're going to be having a lot of these candidates that we've previously interviewed on the program spend the day with us, 30 minutes at a time in panel conversations, discussing specifically how we make government more representative, more trustworthy, and more efficient. So we want to make sure that we understand what a 21st century people-powered government is. So tune in then, June 14th, to be able to attend that session. Shaniyat, thank you again for being here with us today. Rosebuds, I hope you're staying safe out there. And as always, I hope you're staying rosy.